From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. This week's election has ushered in a new political era here in Massachusetts. We elected a new governor as well as a number of new representatives in the state legislature. Voters chose to give casinos the green light while putting a stop to the expanded bottle bill proposal. There are also big changes in our nation's capital that will impact the entire country. All in all, it was an exciting night that gives us a lot to talk about today. Today on 22 News in Focus, we're going to talk about the results of Tuesday's election and what the future looks like for our state. We'll talk to some of our new representatives and those returning to the State House about expectations for the future. We'll also be talking with Hampden County's new district attorney about his plans for office now that his election is official. But joining us first today to talk about Election Day and what it all means, we have political consultant Tony Signoli joining us. Tony, thank you so much for being here.
Excellent, thank you.
First of all, have you ever seen such a close race for governor as we saw on Tuesday?
Not this close. 40,040 votes right down to the wire, waiting for all those small hill towns to come in at the end. It was pretty amazing. And it's great for folks that did go out to vote because it makes the case that your vote counts. Every single vote in this one counted.
Every vote counted in this race. I want to know, is it any coincidence that you think that Connecticut's race for governor was also so close? What is going on right now that the voters are so divided almost right down the middle?
You know, it's intriguing. Very different in Connecticut because you have the incumbent literally fighting for his life. And there were a lot of issues there. But what was intriguing is when you take a look at the breakdown of the vote in Connecticut, how similar it is to Massachusetts as far as to who actually came out to vote for their respective candidates. There's some political science to take a look at there, but they were unique in that here in the Commonwealth, you had two people who were not governor, were not running for incumbency, from an incumbent's point, running against each other. So there were differences, but intriguing similarities when you look at who voted.
It was interesting to see the Republicans take control on a national level like that. So it made us sort of look at the Republicans in our state. Of course, Charlie Baker came out on top in our race. You know, what do you think? Do you think people were voting against the Democratic Party in our state, or were they voting against Martha Coakley? What do you think was going on there?
It really was more so, and when you're looking at chief executive, it's not so much looking at the party or looking at the philosophies or ideologies of one or the other so much from their party perspective, but you're looking at the individuals. You're talking about chief executive, arguably the person who's going to sit behind the big desk and make the big decisions. You've got to have a level of comfort with that person. And Baker closed that deal a little better because to win this race, he didn't just do it with Republican voters. He had to bring independents, unenrolled, and Democrats over to his category to get elected here.
It was an interesting race, too, because they both have that name recognition. We know Charlie Baker ran in 2010, a failed campaign. Martha Coakley has made herself known not only as Attorney General, but also running against Scott Brown for that race. You know, so was this sort of an even playing field going into this?
A little bit, because they both were brand names. They both had lost statewide elections. Certainly, Attorney General Coakley had won her race for Attorney General, but they were both brands that had to reinvent themselves, reintroduce themselves from their last notable failures at statewide office. And they did that pretty well, but frankly, Charlie Baker did it better. The Charlie Baker that ran this time was very different than 4 years ago. He had a different demeanor, different way about him, a little more laid back, a little more direct, talked more so in ways that folks could understand what it was that he was saying. He wasn't the Harvard Pilgrim CEO that we saw 4 years ago. This was a little softer, gentler, a little more direct.
Now, in the past, we've seen record turnout for casino votes, in particular, in the individual communities. Do you think that the casinos brought people out for this election, or do you think that there were other more dominating issues that were bringing people out today?
Early on, a lot of us thought it was going to be casino that would help to drive people to the polls, because it's such a polarizing issue. You're either for it or against it, passionately so one way or the other. But it actually turned out that some of the other questions really drove people to the polls as well. People angry about gasoline, and in their mind, it wasn't the indexing or is the legislature voting on this or not, or do we have to deal with this? It was something else. People remember $4 a gallon gas, and this was their one opportunity to show up and say, I'm angry. Even though there were great arguments on the other side that, gosh, if you do this, if you throw this down, you know, if you get rid of the indexing issue and whatnot, or the automatic gas tax in Massachusetts, that this is going to cost us $1 billion. People kind of went past that. That was passionate and brought people out. The bottle bill was a much more passionate fight, given a very good campaign that was waged in that regard. But the other thing, Tip O'Neill was right. All politics is local. When you look at the Eric Lesser campaign, when you look at Don Hummus and Leahy, when you look at the district attorney's campaign up to the time of the primary where there was a contest, This was driving people. People were getting tuned in because of these candidates. JFK was right. You can judge the kind of a public official that a person is going to be by the candidate's going to be by the campaign that they run. These campaigns were fired up. That helped to bring people out too. Very much so, I think. And if you look at the governor's races, we do the analysis of that, where the numbers were higher was in places where there were contested legislative races across the Commonwealth.
Very interesting. Now, it seems every couple of years we switch the dominant party, so to speak. You know, you'll have people really pushing behind the Democrats one year, and then a couple of years later we're all pushing behind the Republicans. You know, you see this shift happen every couple of years. What do you think this means looking forward to the, presidential race in a couple of years? What do you think is happening?
You know, it's intriguing as you look at the United States, which is much redder after Tuesday, not just the United States Senate, which has gotten most of the focus. Take a look at how many Republicans have taken the corner office for governorships. That is intriguing. That does have an impact in 2016. In my profession, we like to say it's governors who make presidents and often who become presidents. In this instance, these folks have got armies and fiefdoms now within their own states. It makes a big difference as Republicans go out in their own primary and caucuses and whatnot, but it makes a big difference in the general elections too. Governors are powerful. This is intriguing, and that's why Baker in Massachusetts is important to the Republican Party. And you're right, the pendulum swings sometimes, but it's really just in the governor's office. Another thing that happened in this governor's race, people generally still like Deval Patrick personally, but the last year and a half of issues that we've seen in the media, of state government not getting the job done right, whether it was the DCF issues that affected literally the lives of little children, to so many other things, issues at DOT, etc., people, that registers with them. They want their state government to be effective and to be responsive. Hence, some of the changes that I think we're seeing, not just in the corner office, but even some of the legislative seats.
So do you think that getting things done in Massachusetts is going to be more difficult with a Republican governor now when you still have a primarily blue state behind him?
I don't think so, for a couple of reasons. One, Baker is a good student of history, and if you looked at election night, who was he sitting next to? His daughter and his wife. Who was the next closest human being sitting there to him? Bill Weld. Bill Weld was a Republican governor that knew how to work with a Democratic House and Senate. Take a look at what else is happening. Stan Rosenberg is about to become the Senate president in Massachusetts. Here's a guy with outsider credentials, outsider, good guy, clean jean credentials, but who also knows how it works on the inside. I think you're going to see a partnership with those two to get things done. They'll put the partisanship aside and work also with Speaker DeLeo in that regard. Okay.
And now, for those potential candidates that we're going to see come out in the next couple of years for, most offices and whatever office is coming up, especially the presidential race, we're looking to see who those candidates are going to be. What do you think they took out of election night when you sort of look at the big picture? What are some of those issues that they're going to need to stand behind, those people that they may want to distance themselves from? What do you think is the big takeaway from this election that future candidates are going to want to take a look at?
After an election, it's not the obvious that we see for a few days in the media. It's the other stories, the behind-the-scenes stories that come out. The Democratic apparatus, the players, the consultants, the advisors, they take a look at what just happened with the United States Senate, and they see a guy that they underestimated, Mitch McConnell. Not just because they thought he was embattled in his own state and had to pay attention to that, but they underestimated some of the other Republican advisors, and McConnell himself, who had the advice of someone like Haley Barbour. They sat back and they figured out, where are we in trouble? They didn't take for granted some of their own seats. And they came at this with a whole new game plan. There's a lot of players who are realizing that what happened Tuesday will affect 2015 and municipal elections around the United States, but also 2016. There's a game plan that's a little better and a little more well put together than we've seen from the Republicans in a while. It harkens back to the kind of success that they've had with Bush and Reagan before them. It's a different level of play. Now the Democrats have got to step up to that as well, too. Some of the folks in the Democratic advisory roles to these campaigns and looking at the presidency, you do the homework on this. You learn more from the ones you lose than from the ones that you win. And I think that's what you're going to see happening right now on the Democratic side.
And I want to ask the same question. We talked about the state legislature getting things done with a Republican leader. How about on the nationwide scope when you have a Democratic president and now Republican on both sides? What do you think we're going to see over the next couple of years?
Unfortunately, I think you'll see more of the same outcome-wise. I think you'll see the president very, very embattled. The president's going to make some serious decisions here. Is this his Lincoln moment? Is this when he really does start to do more by executive decision, by executive edict. That's difficult for him to have to figure out, because now he's talking about legacy. He's talking about the ending of 8 years. What did I get done or not really get done? And there's something else. When you take a look at Mitch McConnell's speech on election evening, when you look at Boehner's comments, these are softer, gentler comments than we've heard from them in the past. They're starting to set the stage in the public sense. You know, we're the reasonable ones. We're the folks who are going to get things done. And watch what they go for first. It's really a surprise. I think it's going to be immigration reform, because if the Republicans can say, we the Republicans are addressing this, that's going to mean a lot, especially with an Hispanic Latino base. That's going to be so important in 2016. That the Republicans might get something done, interesting. The other one, if I don't go too long on that, is tax reform. And why is it interesting to us here? Arguably, the expert in the United States Congress on the Democratic side on tax reform is Richie Neal. What else happened on Tuesday night? Richie Neal moved around. Richie Neal is now the 25th ranking member in seniority. He's 25 in seniority. That's stunning. So even though he may be in the minority party now, Neal will be someone to watch in that argument with the Republicans.
Wow. You know, and it's not our state, but of course I was watching to see what happened with Scott Brown on election night as well, because it was interesting to watch him jump state lines. He ultimately ended up losing. Was that a surprise to you? Do you think he would have done better running for governor in Massachusetts? What do you think?
I think in Massachusetts the same issues that dogged him and hurt him when he ran against Elizabeth Warren would have still been there. Scott Brown in Massachusetts had serious issues with women voters. They didn't go away when he went to New Hampshire, but they were a little bit different. And Jeanne Shaheen did a great job making the case of, here's what I've done for you as your United States Senator. And who is this guy? And as we look at the breakdown there, the other problem that Scott Brown had, he couldn't sell the deal completely with Republicans who viewed him still as a carpetbagger. There were almost 40% of the Republican electorate 2 weeks before the election that still viewed him as that guy from Massachusetts with the wrong zip code.
And the truck that took
and the
him
truck.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
He might have wanted to upgrade the truck or make a change there. The same truck didn't really work again.
No, it didn't. Political consultant Tony Signoli, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you get some sleep. I know you've had a busy couple of days. Feel better and get some sleep. Thank you so much for coming on. And after the break, we'll talk to some of the new faces on Beacon Hill and in some top positions back home. We'll start with Hampden County's new district attorney. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about Tuesday's election and how the results may affect us for years to come. We started off with an analysis from political consultant Tony Signoli. Later in the program, we'll hear from some of the new and returning faces on Beacon Hill. We'll have the chance to hear how some of the changes will impact us and how things are done at the State House. But first, we have someone who we didn't hear a lot about on election night because he pretty much secured his seat in the primary election. It just didn't become official until Tuesday night. Joining us now, we have the new Hampden County District Attorney, Anthony Gallooni, joining us. Thank you for being here. Congratulations on the job.
Thank you very much.
So you faced a pretty contentious primary race and ended up on top. First of all, how did that feel for you? Just moving from assistant DA, now moving into the top spot.
It was exhilarating. It was just a terrific experience, and I took a leave of absence back in May and really focused 100% of my time and energy on campaigning. So the investment was great, and the effort I put into it was everything I had. So to stand victorious on September 9th was just so exciting, and so many people to thank. It took so much to get us there, so it was a great experience.
So what have you been doing since primary night? I know that you were out doing some campaigning. I guess what was your game plan there going into November?
Well, I had to rest to get my wits back about me because I was very, very tired and I worked hard. So a part of that was a bit of rest and rehabilitation, which took some time. But primarily, we were respectful of the process, knowing that at that point I was just a Democratic nominee for DA and not the DA-elect yet. So I did still engage in some campaigning and continued to get my message out and talk with folks and refine my message. But I did begin to think about the transition process in the few weeks before this election. Because that is a very significant hurdle in front of me to make sure we're ready on day one, which will be January 7th for me.
So the transition process has begun now. I know that you are the youngest district attorney elected to this position. Are you feeling ready to step into such an important role in the county?
Well, I did just turn 34 last week, so I feel like I'm old enough now to be the district attorney. So
33.
It's no longer an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of work to do. we've begun the transition process. At this juncture now, I am assembling a transition team, and that will be a member or a number of people who are close to me, people that can help me in the personnel side of things, but I think also lend a hand in formulating a better plan as to community outreach and some of the specific initiatives that I talked about as a candidate and that I really think are going to make a difference in Hampden County. So right now, we're in the process of informing current employees of the DA's office what the process will be for their reapplication, and we're going to open up the office and open it up for applications as broadly as possible, because I think it's incumbent upon me, of course, and it's going to be the foundation of everything we do to have the best team of people possible in that office. So that's my immediate focus. And the transition team will be announced over the course of the next week or so, but we've begun, and it's a lot of work, but you know, the focus is being ready on day one and making Hampden County a safe place.
Very good. Now, when you do get in and you are settled, what are some of your top priorities? Obviously, there is a number of different issues that you face in Hampden County, you know, from heroin use to street crime, gang-related, gun violence. You know, what are some of these top issues and priorities that you're going into this? What would you like to do?
There are a lot of pressing issues, and that was something I certainly contemplated in formulating my platform, but I understood early on, because with those challenges, I think, comes great opportunity. And as I talked about a lot, I'm a native of Springfield and live here now. So I understand the issues, I think, intimately. And the thing that I think I have to focus on immediately, other than getting that staff in place and getting the proper initiatives and programs in place, is the urban crime problem in places like Springfield and Holyoke, where you know, we had a violent summer in Springfield. So I think working with local law enforcement, working with the state police, in focusing on that issue and making sure that we're prosecuting the cases effectively, but we're beginning the process, which I think is so critical, of getting out of the courthouse and hopefully dealing with young people before they get to those points in their lives where they're engaging in, you know, activities surrounding guns and gangs and drugs. So that's something we'll focus on. A lot of what is going on now will continue in terms of the cold case unit. We're going to continue a focus on domestic violence. And the heroin problem you mentioned, Laura, will be something that we'll put a renewed focus on, because that's something that spans really the entire county. And is almost reaching epidemic level. So I'll work with our legislative delegation here in Hampden County and with local law enforcement to make sure we're getting the resources to combat this problem as fiercely as we can.
Now, you mentioned speaking with some young people. I know Mark Mastriani had a program where he used to go into the schools and sort of adopt a school and, you know, and show them how the legal process works and all that. Do you have plans to continue that same program, or do you think you're going to expand that and sort of create your own, you know, name in these schools and get into more schools? What are your plans to reach out to the youth?
I do, and we're going to have a community outreach unit that is bolstered and that is stronger and has more resources than it has currently, because again, that I think is critical to our long-term success as a county. But one program that will certainly be continued, which I think is terrific, is the Youth Advisory Board, which takes kids from each high school in Hampden County and brings them into the office as advisors to the district attorney. And I think we benefit probably more than the kids do, because they give us a real sense of what's going on in their high school and really you know, a larger sense of what's going on in that particular community. And it's unique to those communities because Hampden County is such a diverse place, of course. So that's something that will continue. But one of my plans is to get into middle schools, especially in these urban areas in the county, and really try to confront kids early on about the dangers of drug use, the dangers of gang activity, the dangers of guns and street crimes. We're doing programs like that where we're going around talking about distracted driving in all the high schools, and I think that sort of approach can be duplicated or adapted to other things to focus on education and hopefully change young people's directions before they ever come to the courthouse, and we hopefully never see them.
That's right. The distracted driving program has been very successful. I know that you've pulled in some folks who are in jail to come and actually speak to people. Is that something that will also continue as well?
No question. It's been tremendously successful, and I've witnessed it as a member of the office. Typically a prosecutor, a victim witness advocate, and someone who's been prosecuted and convicted of a similar offense goes out and speaks to young people. And I know that having witnessed some of these programs and talking with some of the folks involved in our office, that most often, wherever you go, these kids are really interested and engaged, and they understand the issues with distracted driving, including texting and driving and drinking and driving, of course. So it's resonated, and it's something that will continue and try to adapt to do it for other issues that I think are confronting young people. As
a district attorney, how do you balance convicting and prosecuting offenders and repeat offenders, and the issue of the overcrowding in the jails as well? You know, how do you sort of prioritize which case gets the full extent of the prosecution? You know, how does that work?
Well, my fundamental responsibility as district attorney is to protect the residents of Hampden County through our work in the courtroom. And that's prosecuting cases. So especially when it comes to violent offenders and repeat offenders, as I talked about as a candidate, we have to have limited, if no tolerance at all, for these kinds of folks who are hurting other people, who are victimizing people who are vulnerable, and who are committing offense after offense after offense. We have to take them off the streets, and that is our fundamental responsibility. But I think in terms of when you think about the larger issues of overcrowding and hopefully rehabilitation of some of these offenders, we have to identify the people who are young, who we can really affect and hopefully change their lives through a prosecution, through probation, through a diversion program. We have to identify people who are suffering from really core issues whose outgrowth is the crime. So whether it's mental health or it's substance abuse, if we can identify those core issues when they come into the courthouse, through our resources, through our prosecutors, through the probation department and the trial court, those partnerships, if we can identify those issues and treat them as opposed to treating it as a criminal justice issue and more so as a public health issue, especially when it comes to mental health and substance abuse, I think it makes sense from a humanitarian perspective. I think we're doing our job more effectively, and we're ultimately saving money because we're investing those resources early, hopefully changing those lives so they don't recidivate.
And how do you get those folks who are potential witnesses in maybe domestic violence or just the street crime, you know, who are concerned about retaliation and frequently won't offer information? They sort of stonewall police. How do you break that barrier for those folks who are nervous to talk to law enforcement?
I think that's one of the more complicated issues that law enforcement is dealing with, and I've already had conversations with folks in the Springfield Police Department, from captains to some of the detectives that work with these murder cases about this very issue. I think there's probably a multi-pronged approach. One is, and I think this is beholden, or this is something that my office really has to do, is get out into the community and hopefully establish those lines of communication, establish trust between law enforcement, specifically the DA's office, and these folks who feel intimidated. Because I think right now there's actually an opportunity, because there's a real appetite for change. I think people in Springfield, places where crime is at its worst, are frustrated and understand that being quiet and staying in their homes and turning a blind eye to the problem is not going to help anything. I think the second approach is being a little more aggressive with these people who are avoiding serving as witnesses, avoiding prosecution through these issues. And that is using some of the statutes we have on the books and prosecuting people for perjurious behavior, for lying to investigators. We have those tools, and it's time we use them and say we're not going to tolerate avoiding, cooperating with the police when we know that, we need your help and you have information that can take someone who's dangerous off the street.
Very good. Anthony Gallooni, Hampden County's new district attorney, thank you so much for being here and talking to us about this. We certainly wish you good luck in your new office, and we'll be following up with you to see how everything goes. Good luck to you.
Thanks.
And next we'll hear from some of our new and returning State House representatives about changes coming to Beacon Hill. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about the results of this week's election and the changes we'll be seeing across the state. We got an election night recap from political consultant Tony Signoli. We also heard from Hampden County's new district attorney. In just a little bit, we'll hear from two new state representatives. We have Senator-elect Eric Lesser here, and we have State Representative-elect Carlos Gonzalez as well. Before we talk to them about their plans for Boston, let's first talk to returning Republican State Senator Don Humison from Westfield, who represents represents the 2nd Hamden, Hampshire district, to talk about some of the changes coming to Beacon Hill. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be back, and I mean that.
Yes, well, congratulations to you.
Thanks,
You
Laura.
also had a race this November, and you came out on top. You must be feeling great to be heading back. What are some of your thoughts now that you see what election night held for the state? A Republican governor.
Very excited about that. Certainly, I know Charlie Baker and Karen Polito very well. I served with the future lieutenant governor. She sat next to me in the House chamber for almost 6 years, so I know Karen very well, and I know Charlie, and I'm excited to get going. I talked to both of them just today about their transition plans and about what role that we can play here in Western Massachusetts, and offered assistance in any way that I can provide. And of course, having Stan Rosenberg coming in as our Senate president, there's just going to be a lot of great changes. And of course, we have a great new delegation in Western Massachusetts, legislatively, both Republicans and Democrats, who will represent the people of the 4 Western counties, I think, with great distinction over the next 2 years. And I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah. So you've been there for 11 years.
11 in the House,
so
11 months in the Senate.
Okay,
Yep.
Very good. So, as someone who has experienced the Democratic governor, do you think that this is going to change the way things are actually put through? How difficult has it been in the past, or not difficult, I guess? And what are you expecting going into this?
Yeah, Massachusetts, I think you talked about it earlier, has a good tradition of having a Democratic legislature, a Republican executive, Republican governors for a long, long time, and then, of course, interrupted by the 8 years of Governor Patrick's term. I think we'll go right back into that system where we have sort of a friendly but adversarial system where, the legislature is supposed to act as a check and governor on the governor, and the governor is supposed to act as a check and balance on the legislature. But I think, and Tony said it really well, that Charlie and Karen are professionals. They know how to deal with us. They know how to work with the legislature. We certainly know how to work with them. I don't see a problem. In fact, I'm enthusiastic. I'm kind of excited about it. I know that in the start of any new term, you always have a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm towards what could take place. But in this case, you've got some people with a lot of experience too, and so they're not coming up without any kind of a background. They know exactly what they want to do for this Commonwealth, and we'll all get a chance to work together on that.
Okay. Now, some issues passed on the ballot. We had the casino repeal that was turned down, so it looks like casinos are on their way.
They are. Big impact for us here in Springfield.
Yes, absolutely. The gas tax was another issue that was taken care of as well. First off, we'll start with the casinos. Now that these are coming through, what do you think that the state legislature has to do to ensure a smooth process? This is going to be potentially a big change for us here financially. Just as a whole, it could change, the make of the state a little bit.
Well, honestly, I think we need to stay away in that the legislature created the Gaming Commission to oversee this, and we wanted to take ourselves out of it politically so that you didn't have local elected officials in the way too much. Basically, we wanted to stay removed from the process, observe, of course, make changes where we have to, but the overall goal is to allow the process to work. It's been a long process. It surprised so many people that it's taken as long as it has, but now we finally have shovels in the ground, and we've got these casinos being built. We will, of course, be cognizant about any impact on local aid, impact on the communities that are abutting the sites of these casinos, and making sure that there isn't or aren't negative impacts. But I really think we've got to allow the process to work.
Okay, and I know that there was some money sort of built into this.
Oh, absolutely. There are funds and funds in the casino law to make sure there's money for gambling addicts and problems like that. There's money to hold communities harmless. There's money to make sure that neighboring communities are pretty much protected. There's obviously money in the law to make sure that the state lottery is not impacted, so that local aid coming back to cities and towns isn't damaged. So we really, I think, over-engineered it, and now that's why I say we kind of have to give it a chance to work, because it's finally gotten that ability now that the people have spoken and casinos are going to be the law of the land, just to let them happen.
Let the process breathe a little bit and do its thing. The gas tax. This was, a highly debated issue throughout this campaign, and it will not be tied to inflation now. Is this much of a change for the legislature? So now you're going to have to vote every time you want to, give out money.
It's the way it should be. I mean, the people of our Commonwealth elect their legislators to vote, and sometimes the votes we have to take are difficult votes. And anytime you take a tax vote, that's extremely difficult. Every year when we take a budget vote, that is the single biggest bill that we do in any given year, any given session. And so that budget vote has to be very thoughtful about how we, as a collective body of 160 state representatives and 40 senators, allocate the resources of the Commonwealth. And if everybody agrees, as I know they do, that transportation and infrastructure is important, then we need to look at the $35 billion that we have to spend and make sure we allocate that appropriately, using money that comes in from the gas tax, for example, but also in the bonding that we do, so that we can look forward, look out not just 2 years or 4 years or 10 years, but we have to look at the next 20 years of what we want Western Massachusetts and the entire state to look like from our transportation infrastructure point of view.
There were some concerns that if this did not go through, there was question about the money for I-91 viaduct happening, because that's a very important
that was a real scare tactic. I think they were
Okay.
the side that wanted to keep the automatic gas tax increase in there was trying to tell people that if this question ended up passing, that you lose that money for the money for all the big projects that are important to us. But honestly, the money is there. It's whether that money increases over the next couple of years, whether we decide to take another vote to do that or not.
As we're watching the viaduct crumble.
Well, of course, exactly. So it is a huge project to our north-south way of getting from state to state, never mind from city to city. So we do have to keep an eye on that too.
So what are you think going into this next session now? What do you think the big issues are going to be for you? Is there anything that didn't sort of get met the last session that sort of got table talk for elections?
We always have to be cognizant of our the economical environment of the state. We have to worry about jobs, and that's so important to us because in the 4 western counties we don't enjoy the same sort of success that they have out in the Boston area, the high-tech area. So we, as Western Mass legislators, have to be aware of the economy and how what we do on Boston impacts the jobs that are available for our people here in Western Massachusetts. And I've always said throughout the process that if our economy is going well, then sort of the other things take care of themselves. If the economy is going well and people are working, then they're paying their taxes. The taxes come into the government can reallocate that money appropriately towards the priorities that we have here in our state. So I think that's got to be something that Governor Baker looks at and something that our new legislature looks at as well.
Okay, and we have some new elected officials heading to begin. We're going to talk to them in just
It's going to be a lot of fun working with them.
What is your advice for someone who's heading there for the first time?
Listen to your constituents. That's the most important thing, and be accessible. Get out there, get out of your office, stay away from the State House as much as you can, and get out into your communities. That's the best thing you can do.
Transparency and keep your promises, right?
And that's exactly true.
Don Humison, thank you so much for being
Thanks,
here.
Laura.
Congratulations to you again. We look forward to seeing what this next session holds for you, and we'll of course be talking to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
From a returning representative to newer faces in Boston, we'll hear from a state senator-elect after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. They were reviewing the results of this week's election. We heard from a political consultant, Hampden County's new DA, about his plans, and we talked about some of the changes coming to Beacon Hill with returning State Senator Don Humison. Joining me now is a newcomer to Massachusetts politics. We have Eric Lesser, who will be representing the 1st Hampden and Hampshire district in the state Senate. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on your run. Has it quite sunk in yet that you are heading to the Senate?
Not quite. It began to sink in on election night, but still a little bleary-eyed from the effort. But now looking forward to putting the team together and moving forward on all the big issues we got to tackle.
That's great.
Starting to sink in.
I felt good to even have guests here because I know everyone's exhausted from it. So I appreciate you coming on
Happy to be here.
and talking to me about this. So tell us about yourself. I know that you're a former White House aide, now making his way to the state Senate. What are you most looking forward to as you embark on this new journey?
Well, I'm most looking forward to, as Senator Humison said, working on more economic development here in Western Mass, because we know actually that the economy in Massachusetts has been doing pretty well in some parts of Massachusetts in recent years. We need to make sure that that growth, that opportunity is shared here in the western part of the state. So that means increasing connectivity, more entrepreneurship, spurring more innovation, better connecting ourselves to the growing economies in the eastern part of the state and just to the south of us. So those are the issues that I really want to take on. I think my time working in the White House, it taught me a few things. One thing it taught me is that, change begins on the local level. Change begins in neighborhoods and in communities. And so I'm going to be committed to staying connected to the 9 cities and towns of our district, of my district, and of all the different communities that it makes up. I was proud to have a very grassroots effort. We knocked on close to 60,000 doors over the course of our campaign, talking to people on their front steps, at coffee shops, at block parties. That's what we'll continue to do, even while I'm serving in the Senate, because I think it's important to have that neighborhood connection, then to bring that insight and all those things you learn in those conversations, you bring that to bear in the Senate chamber. That's what I'm ready to do.
So while you were campaigning, did you notice anything that you didn't know prior to running the campaign? What communities did you see really needed some effort or some help, or any issues that you want to target after talking to some of those people? What were some of those things that you discovered while out there?
Well, it's a long list, because you learn a lot over the course of a campaign, of course, and especially a long campaign like we had. One thing that really came to bear as I campaigned and went door to door is the heroin addiction crisis is hitting every community in Western Massachusetts. There's very few families actually that don't have someone they know personally, or a friend or a neighbor who are a family member themselves who have been touched by that crisis. So I'm prepared to take that on right away, even beginning now, before we even take office, to make sure that we get the resources we need to take on that crisis, and to make sure that we work with local law enforcement, community members, social workers, the people who are the closest to the problem, to get the resources that they need to get moving on that issue.
So do you think that that's going to be the first piece of legislation that you file when you get there, or is there a piece of legislation that right away that you're going to support? I guess, what is your first job when you get there that you think?
Well, I think the very first thing I want to do when I get there is put together an economic development package for Western Massachusetts, because as Senator Humison mentioned, all of these issues are interrelated. When the economy is growing, when we're creating opportunity, when people are earning a good living, that helps our public safety issue, that helps drug abuse issues and substance abuse issues, that helps bring more vitality into the area. And one of the key things that we'll need, I believe, is a high-speed rail line between Boston and Springfield. This has been talked about for a generation. We now have a new Senate president who's going to be taking office as well, the first in a generation from Western Massachusetts, Stan Rosenberg. I've spoken with him. I spoke today with Congressman Neal. I spoke with Governor Patrick yesterday morning. I'm ready to hit the ground running to make sure that Springfield and all the communities around Springfield finally get the attention that they need. And I think a rail link and working on that is going to be one of my first priorities. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen the very first day, but we can get the process started the very first day to move forward on that.
Yeah, it's something that's been talked about for years, but as you say, it just takes someone with some interest to go in there and actually file and try to push something through with that. It's very interesting. Now, what committees do you have an interest in sitting on?
That's a great question. So, I'm working right now on deciding that. I've been in touch with the current Senate President, Terry Murray, about that topic, and we'll be announcing that, of course, soon. There's plenty of time to make all those decisions, but I will say this. My number one goal, and it's been my goal from the entire campaign, and it will be the guiding goal of my time in the state Senate, will be how we make life for families in Western Massachusetts better, how we improve quality of life for our families. I have a 16-month-old daughter myself, and so that's an overriding concern for me. And no matter what committee I'm on, no matter what assignment I get, where my office is, any of those details, it's going to all be pointed towards that one goal, which is making life a little bit better and improving quality of life just even a little bit for the families in our area.
Well, it's a good goal. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. During your campaign, I know that you had mentioned that you garnered a lot of financial support outside of the district as well. As someone who spent some time in Washington, I know some people are wondering, you are so young, what are your career goals? Of course, you're probably just focused at the issue on the issue at hand right now. But what do you have any future plans to make it back to Washington someday, or what are your thoughts?
My plan is to stay right here. My daughter's enrolled in preschool at the JCC. She's settled, and we've got her in a good place, especially after a chaotic campaign season. So that's number one. And you know, like I said, my number one goal is making sure that we're improving life for our families here in Western Mass, and that's what I'm going to be focused on. And I'm very excited to take on the job of state senator, and it's a big job because we've got some big challenges ahead of us. You know, Western Mass is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. We also know that we increasingly need to make some big decisions to keep us competitive. So I'm going to have my hands full working on that, and that's where I'm going to be focused.
It's hard to think about running for anything after you just get out of election day, right? You just want to catch up on some sleep. Eric Lester, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Good luck to you in the Senate. It's going to be so exciting to see what comes of this. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And after the break, we'll be talking with a Springfield businessman who will be representing his district in the state's House of Representatives. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about Tuesday's election results. We've discussed the questions and the new Republican administration. We talked with the new district attorney and a new state senator. Joining me now is another new face at the State House. We have Carlos Gonzalez representing the 10th Hampden District in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll ask you the same. Has it quite settled in yet that you're heading there? What are you thinking as you embark on this new career here?
Well, we kept going from September 9th to Election Day. We kept knocking on doors. 642 more doors we knocked on from that period of time, although we didn't have a contender. We thought it was important to continue discussing the issues and listening to the 10th Hampden District residents. So we're excited. We're just eager, and actually I'm ready to go.
Yeah. So I know that the casino is actually in your district, you know, so what do you have any concerns as that moves forward? That's one thing in particular. We've been looking at that issue, wondering how it's going to impact us. Did you hear anything from people when you were knocking on doors and talking to them?
Well, obviously you had folks on both sides of the equation again, but I basically think that I'm going to Boston and I want to be a common sense community representative. I think that having a casino and bringing the jobs to the city of Springfield are crucial and important to really fighting those three issues that I want to really concentrate on. One is protecting our seniors from crime and predatory practices, as well as protecting our children from predators. Two is from really protecting our middle class and reducing that tax burden. In addition to that, we want to really combat poverty and the recidivism of poverty, as well as we want to grow our small business communities.
So when you head to Boston, what do you think is your first line of business? Do you have a piece of legislation that you want to file right away, or support another piece of legislation that maybe isn't going anywhere? What would you want to do first?
Well, one of the issues that I ran on, again, I'm going to try to propose is harsher penalties for anybody committing a crime in a senior housing complex or against any senior resident in Massachusetts. Two, I strongly believe that micro business development needs to be at the forefront of economic development, and I think that has been lacking. Sometimes the fanfare of cutting ribbons for somebody that's going to create 300 jobs is great, but the reality is that you get 300 small businesses in a community, and that makes a significant impact and a more positive on the economic climate of a city.
That's interesting. And so is this something that you were hearing from folks, when you talk about the seniors? Are you hearing a real problem of that in your district right now?
Well, we look at crime as an issue, and we heard it throughout the campaign, and we hear it throughout all urban cities in Massachusetts. But again, I think that we need to protect our seniors, we need to protect our children, and I think we're going to be looking at how to be tough on crime, but also tougher on opportunities, to create more demand for opportunities for those folks that are faced with the challenges of life and opportunities, and really seek greater and better opportunities for them to achieve more success in their lives.
Excellent. Now, Carlos, you may be new to Beacon Hill, but you were certainly a familiar face in Western Massachusetts and across the state. You've always been a community activist and the president and founder of the Massachusetts Latino Chamber of Commerce. You've had some really great success in your life, in your career. How are you going to use this to be successful in this next chapter?
I think the experience is great because, again, I know what it is to open and start a small business. I know what it is to deal with social services and the issues that are facing our communities. I've had all those experiences. And again, with experience comes better opportunity to kind of look at both sides of an issue. I think sometimes we believe that we know all the answers, but I'm a listener. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to negotiate what is in the best possible solution to some difficult situations that we have facing us today and in the future. So I think that experience working in government and as a legislative aide is also going to give me that opportunity, but I know Beacon Hill. And again, I know that this district, the 10th Hamptons district, has really had, due to the resignation of our great representative, Cheryl Coakley-Rivera, hasn't had that representation. So I'm hoping that maybe there's some opportunity for us to be sworn in earlier.
There you go. How does this transition work now? I guess, what are you doing to make this a smooth transition so that when you are official, you can really hit the ground running?
Well, I started transitioning from the day I started running back in 8 months ago.
Good for
I've been
you.
dealing.
Good answer.
I've been dealing with constituent issues from my capacity as president of the Massachusetts Latino Chamber of Commerce. I've been doing that for so many years that folks have been coming now thinking that I have already been elected even before the September 9th as the state representative. So we've been working on those issues. We're still listening. We're still looking for potential other solutions and other ideas that we can embrace. I'm reaching out in the next couple of weeks to all the candidates that were at the race with me and looking for their ideas and solutions to some of the issues that they heard throughout the campaign trail. So we're looking to bring people together and work on making the best potential solutions for a Western Mass impact, but also really bring Springfield what it really needs is a voice in Boston.
That sounds like a great strategy that you had there as well. Are you prepared to, reach across party lines? You're someone who knows a lot of people, and you're a very friendly person. Sometimes, it's going to take reaching across party lines. It can be difficult, I guess. Are you prepared to handle some of those tough decisions when you're there?
Again, common sense solutions. It just, R or D don't mean anything to me. I mean, we've been dealing with those issues. I mean, who cannot reach over the aisle with Senator, a chubby, lovey guy like Senator Hummus?
He's such a nice guy.
Such a nice guy, right? I mean, I think that his interest is no different than mine. It's making a better life for everybody that we represent. Obviously, we have some different ideas of how to get there, but whether it's Charlie Baker or somebody else, we have to be honest. We have to look at some issues that are really facing and how we look at the solutions and come out with the best potential opportunity for everybody to receive that impact.
Very good. Carlos Gonzalez, State Representative-elect, we thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about your ideas and your game plan going into this. We wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here, and good luck to you. And we will have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about the results of this week's elections. There's a new administration on Beacon Hill and plenty of changes ahead for us here in Western Massachusetts and across the state. Today we had the chance to analyze the changes, hear from some of our lawmakers, and Hampden County's new top prosecutor. That is our program for today. We want to thank all of our guests for joining us. Thanks to you at home for watching. If you've missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a wonderful Sunday. Take care.